So today, inshallah, we're going to be starting a new discussion on Ulum al-Hadith. Ulum al-Hadith is something that is very near and dear to my heart. It's actually one of the things that drew me into studying Islamic sciences and studying about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, studying His Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. I wanted to take a little bit of a different approach when dealing with Hadith. So there are going to be two classes that surround this. So the class is going to probably either start next week or the week after, where we're actually going to go into an explanation of Sahih Muslim. I'm going to talk about the hadith in Sahih Muslim, talk about why he included certain ahadith, why he excluded other ahadith. We're also going to talk about how to benefit from those ahadith, the relationship of the chapter headings, because Imam Muslim, he very famously, he organized his books into what are called kutub, right? So he has, for example, Kitab al-Raqa'iq, or he has, Kitab al-Jihad, and he has all of these different books, and then he has a series of ahadith under those books. So why did he put particular ahadith in those particular books? Why did he include certain ahadith in particular order? There are some ahadith that he's clearly showing that, okay, this hadith is not meant to be utilized, and it's important for us to help us understand that. The other side of this is you have hadith terminology. So there are some terminologies that you guys might be familiar with. When I talk about hadith, what hadith do we accept? Or what type of hadith? So sahih, where did this term come from? Right? It's important for us to understand, like in the entire Arabic lexicon, they have a number of different terms and a number of different terminologies. Where did this hadith come from? And how is it that all the hadith scholars agreed that this is the word that we're going to use to describe a particular hadith? What are some other terminologies that you guys are familiar with? Da'if. Da'if is a very famous one also, right? And so for us, in general, we have 5 general categories that we rely upon today. And what you guys know what those 5 categories are? You guys named 2. You named Sahih and Da'if. What else? Hasan. Okay, that's another one. So now you have Sahih, you have Hasan, you have Da'if. What else? You have Mawdu'. Okay, in between Mawdu' and Da'if, you have something that is called Da'if Jiddan, which is very weak. Where did these 5 categories come from? And I will tell you, this actually came from Ibn Hajar. Ibn Hajar, he died at 852, and you're talking about what? About 700-800 years after the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, that we have come to agree that these are the 5 categorical uses that we have today. This is not a classical division. This is something that came later and something that we utilize today. Saying that, so if that's the case, how did previous scholars utilize it? What are the terms that they came to? And how did this terminology develop? And not just that, if you go back to the older books of hadith, you have words like qawi, strong, jayyid, good, right? So you have all of these different terminologies that are meant to express the strength or the weakness of a hadith. How do those work in with this larger and this greater terminology? Also, you have the compilation of the Sunnah, which I think for the Muslims en masse, I think this is something that is fundamentally important. How was the Sunnah compiled? Why? Why is that an important discussion or important topic? How was the Sunnah compiled? How were these prophetic statements, actions, tacit approvals, where do we get them from? Like if I'm reading a hadith today, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam nahan bayl kalb or thaman al kalb. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam forbade the price of a dog. Like, where did that come from? The statement? Narrations, chains. Okay, we hear these terms very often. Like, so isnad, something that's really important. How can I develop this trust in the hadith tradition? Right? So we have this trust with the Quran. How come we don't have the same level of trust with hadith? This is something that deserves to be analyzed. It's something that deserves to be looked at. Because, and the other thing is, the Sunnah itself, how do I incorporate it into the religion? How important is it? Right, it's fundamentally important, right? It's fundamentally important because the Quran, how large is the Quran as a book or as a legal book? What percentage of the Quran has to do with the rulings? It's like 10%, like even less. So you have 10% of our legal corpus is taken, 10% of the Quran is part of our legal corpus. Like, where do I get the other parts? This is where I have to go back to the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And if that's the case, how reliable are those traditions? And in order to help us develop that confidence, it's important for us to understand how it was actually compiled and put together. So here, why study the science? This is something we already talked about. Like, you guys tell me, why are you here? Because it was cool, and like Imam Farhan's really excited about hadith. Not to gain knowledge. Okay, why?
Well, how to understand the hadith and the chain.
Okay, so how to understand the terminology that has to do with hadith in itself and what's around it. Okay, good. Why else?
This is the source for the detail of the religion.
Absolutely, right? So it's important for me to understand where the source, like what is the foundation of the source? Where did it come from? Is it something that I should rely upon? Because many people, and the thing is, I think it happens probably like in my generation, but there was a big attack on the validity of the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, right? This is a big issue. So you talk about like not this generation, but like the generation that preceded it. There's a big attack on the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. This generation, what are some of the issues that they're dealing with? Probably more so than attacking the Sunnah. Like I'm sorry. So there's also attack on the existence of God, right? This is something that they're fundamentally dealing with, or even just understanding the basis of an individual. Like is a person actually fluid, right? Or is there some type of foundation or fundamental, or is it static? Is he static or no? Or can a person actually move through these different phases? Again, no, I'm saying like, and these are challenges, right? These are modern challenges and issues that people are facing. For me, like, and one of the problems is like, okay, when we're dealing with some of these issues, how is it okay for me to deny reality? What is reality, right? And I think a lot of these philosophical, existential questions are the ones that are more of an issue today. Why?
Because of loss of tradition.
Right, there's a loss of tradition that's definitely there. Why did that happen?
The progression through history is like people wanting to kind of realize themselves more and have more autonomy, like the Enlightenment period.
Okay, sure. So you're saying there was a general trend toward more selfishness, more like inner observance, less reliance on religion. Uh-huh. So there definitely is a trend in that direction. Within the Muslim community, why didn't we have, or why weren't we, I would say, protected from that? So us as a Muslim community, how come we're falling into those issues, right? We say that Islam is the religion of truth, right? How come we have Muslims now who are falling into this?
We don't live in a vacuum.
Right, we don't live in a vacuum. That's number one for sure.
So we're affected by many different forms.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what are some of the shortcomings that maybe us as parents had or made? Was it common to teach our children philosophy?
No.
Like to come to a conclusion that there is a God, right? And teaching people, okay, hey, these natural occurrences are actually proofs in God's existence. It's not something that we were really taught. Why do you think that is? Huh? A lack of education, definitely. But I think that awareness, lack of education is an important part of it. What else?
I think it's assumed.
Right. I think we took it for granted. Right. So like, I think a lot of parents, we just kind of take it for granted that belief in God is something that is inherent, and therefore it doesn't need to be taught or explained.
Yeah. So like it wasn't guarded, so it was easily.
It was easily exploited.
Yeah.
The same thing with homosexuality, right? Why was it that the Muslims became so confused when, for many of us, it's a very clear black and white issue? I think the same thing. We took it for granted. So you're talking about before same-sex marriage was allowed, what was the attitude in general in the United States toward homosexuality? Was it a positive or negative view? It was generally negative. So we as Muslims, we did what? We kind of rode the wave. And we took it for granted, and we're like, okay, well, the culture's with us on this. There's no reason for us to even engage or teach it or talk about it. So when the culture changed, and the shift was very quick. Like, I know most of you guys are like really young, but once that happened, how quickly was there a shift in the culture to openness and acceptance and tolerance? Like it was like within a couple of years.
15 years or something.
That's what, within a couple of years, like things changed almost overnight.
Yeah.
So and it's, which is mind-boggling. Like we would never imagine the culture to move so quickly. But things happen and things change, and when we are not prepared for those changes, we see the results in our children. So it's very important for us to always be ahead of the curve. You know, a part of the problems that we have as a community is that we're very what? We're very reactionary, right? We wait for something to happen and then we react to it. But when we react to it, what's the problem with that? So sometimes you can produce, like you can right? You go into extremism. That's definitely one problem. What is the other problem? When I react.
You get in the habit of being reactionary.
I'm sorry?
You get in the habit of being reactionary.
All right, so you develop this habit of kind of being reaction, which is also negative. The other problem is, it's like, okay, in terms of timeline, by the time I'm reacting, what has already happened? It's too late, right? By this point, now instead of dealing with a trickle, you're dealing with what? You're almost dealing like with an overwhelming wave. And it becomes that much more challenging, and it becomes that much more difficult. Like, what is unique about hadith? So based on what you guys know, what is unique about it? And if you don't know, it's okay. Yeah. Okay, it's chain. So can it be argued the Quran has chains or no?
Technically, yeah.
Sure. What do you mean technically?
Well, because the Quran was compiled on the report of the companions.
Okay.
On the two companions.
So
near the Oliver.
All right, so I'm going to, like, and this is a bit of a side discussion, but I have no problem exploring a little bit. The Quran as a whole is what? It's something that we've inherited generation after generation. But the qira'at are what? Qira'at, you actually have chains. You actually have chains where you can go back and trace it back to the qari, or trace it back to the rawi, or trace it back to the rawi. So the Quran as a whole is mutawatir, right? The Quran as a whole is something that we've inherited, but these chains, you have individual chains that have to do with the qira'at.
Even if you say it's mutawatir, doesn't that just mean it has so many chains that you don't get checking?
So that's a usuli discussion. That's more of a yeah. No, I mean, and again, and we had this discussion also with Uthman. So, but it's more of a theoretical discussion on what does mutawatir actually mean, and how is it something that is passed down? Does it have to do with just number of chains, or is it something that's overwhelming that you cannot connect it back to those chains? And it's a valid discussion. It's a valid discussion. How reliable are the narrations that reached us? And this is something that we have to discuss, right? The only way to determine the reliability of something is to actually explore it, right? You actually have to push back. If we take it for granted, what's going to happen? The same problems that we've had with all of these other things. And the reason I mentioned them was just to show examples that when we create holes, what happens? That people exploit them. And it's very natural. Like, oh, your religion isn't right because, well, that's not reliable. Or your religion isn't right because... And the thing about Islam is we have to understand that any attack that comes toward or against Islam, in order for a deen, in order for a religion to be correct, it needs to have what? It needs to be able to defend itself. I might not be able to defend it, right? Like in certain aspects. But that doesn't mean that the religion can't. And that's the beauty of the religion. It is something that it can defend itself. It doesn't need individuals to stand up for it. Sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses individuals for that purpose and for that extent. But at the end of the day, a religion is one that is correct. Why? Because it can stand up on its own. Not because all the other ones are wrong, right? Sometimes there's a false misnomer, right? Where, well, Christianity is wrong and Judaism is wrong. And no. Islam is right because it's right. I don't need to explore all the other religions to prove that. Yes? Huh? You feel I need to explore all the other religions?
I mean, I'm just trying to figure out what does that mean for the religion to defend itself without people. Like, that's just hard for me to conceptualize.
Sure. Okay. So here, well, who has taken responsibility for the religion? Like in protecting it?
Like scholars?
No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says very clearly in the Quran, right? إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ.
And the question is, how does he do that?
How does he do that? So obviously, is going to be means. So how does he do it? Through revelation, right? That was one way of doing it, by preserving it in the heart of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, passing it forward, giving some agency to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so that whenever he sallallahu alaihi wasallam made a mistake, he would always correct him. In surrounding the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam with companions, people who were sincere in them, because even Musa, he was surrounded by people, but what happened? They were always trying to what? Right, they're always trying to undercut. Always trying to undermine. They're always trying to destroy him. You know what I mean? And not just that. When Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, when He talks about the scriptures that He gave to the Jews and the Christians, what does He say? He says that I entrusted it to them, to the people. So every time something is entrusted to people, what happens? It gets skewed. It gets distorted. Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, He is the one who is going to preserve it. And what do I mean by that, akhi? I don't mean that Allah isn't going to use people. I mean that Allah doesn't need me as an individual, right? He doesn't need me to defend His religion. He Azza wa Jal, He will take care. If I'm not here, He's going to what? He'll put someone else, right? He'll choose someone else. Yeah. Is the methodology of the scholars of hadith sound? Is the methodology the same? You know what I mean? This is something that, no, it needs to be explored. And the only way to explore that is to actually do case studies and look into it, okay? Look at these different chains. What happens? What do these different scholars say? And if they say different things, is it because there's a difference in methodology or is a difference in application? Maybe one scholar knew something about a narrator that another scholar didn't know, and therefore he came to a different conclusion. Or did they have fundamentally different methodologies? Huh? It's possible. Like, all of these things are possible. And these are the things that, inshallah, we're going to try to spend time and we're going to explore. But the first thing that I do want to talk about is like, and there are a number of things, inshallah, that I hope to be able to express throughout this course, is learning what the science of hadith is. Right? It is a wonderful, beautiful, detailed, very in-depth science. One of the most hated classes that I actually had in the kulliyah, right, when I was in college, was Mustalah al-Hadith. Right? So hadith terminology, I hated it. It was like, I didn't enjoy the class at all. And the reason is because I was like, okay, you know, if you have a terminology for something, what do I need to spend time here? All I'm doing is just memorizing a term and what it means. To the point where it ended up becoming the most beloved science to me. And a lot of that has to do with my teacher. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve and protect him. But he really opened my eyes into be like, okay, well, where do these terms come from? Is it enough for me to rely on XYZ scholar when he says that this is what it means? Because the only way to actually look in what a word means is to look at where that word is used in multiple places, in multiple situations, and in multiple books. Get a glimpse into the understanding of the methodology. Again, it's important. Is the methodology valid? This is a very important question. Is the methodology that they use valid? Is this something that is worthy of exploring? And it's important that we understand that the Quran is the foundation of the religion. There's no doubt, right? So after Quran, all of the scholars, they agree that what is the second source of Tashiriya, of Islamic law? The Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So there's a set of questions that I have here. And granted, the hadith corpus and worlds are many and great, but how do we know their methodology was sound? Works. There shouldn't be worlds, okay? How do we know their methodology is sound? Again, this is a question that we're going to be coming back to and reinforcing. How can we guarantee the results are sound? And how do we know they've reached what they have set out to do? And this is there's a three-part answer to this. What does this require? We have to understand, number one, does this fit in with logic? And why is it important that we present this idea that the hadith methodology is actually logical?
I guess it's something that can transcend, like logic is something that overlaps different people's perspectives regardless.
For sure. I agree. I agree with that 100%. What else? Did the Prophet ﷺ tell us how to grade hadith? Did he say these are the 5 conditions for a sound hadith? And when you go and you deal with narrators, this is what you need to do? Right? There's no wahi there. There was no revelation that was involved in dealing with the science of hadith. So where are you going to get the science from? It has to appear what? It has to be logical, right? It has to be. Because if it doesn't make sense, or if I make it random, does it become repeatable? Right? If I don't have a repeatable mechanism, then it becomes that much more difficult to implement. Because it's like, okay, well, he's doing his thing, and she's doing her thing, and he's doing his thing. What are the chances that they'll actually come to the same conclusions? It's not going to happen, because it's random. And if we can understand that it's logical, it shows us that there is actually a goal that can be reached because they're all using the same type of logic when dealing with this information. Understanding the methodology. So there's a depth to this methodology. And this is many times overlooked because going into the science of hadith itself it's not for everyone. It's definitely not for everyone. The way that you're dealing with a lot of names, you're dealing with a lot of places, you're dealing with a lot of situations, you're dealing sometimes with like this massive number of chains that you're trying to untangle and figure out where they're going back to. You're trying to figure out, okay, how do I deal with this? Where did this person narrate? Did these people actually live at the same time? Right? And all of these different factors you're trying to work into the equation. And it's not, a lot of people, they misconstrue or they misunderstand hadith thinking that it's math, right? So if I have a sound narrator equals a sahih hadith. It's not. You have to look at the situations of every single one of these. It's more sociology than it is math. And I know that sometimes that's a little bit more hard to like grasp, but if I understand the situations and the era and the people that are around it, that's exactly what sociology is. And once we understand the depth, this will serve as a proof and be like, after I spend time with the methodology and be like, okay, hey, this is how they came to these conclusions, it's that much more convincing to me. I can actually sit down and be like, okay, yeah, this makes sense. Like, not only does this make sense, this is bulletproof, right? This argument that they have is bulletproof, and this is why I can reach the conclusions that I can, and this is why I can rely whenever Imam Muslim, he narrates a hadith, this is why I can rely on it. Or Imam Bukhari. Or even Abu Dawud or Nasa'i, depending on the different books, because even they had their own, not methodologies and maybe compilation, not necessarily in how they graded, but in why they put particular hadith in their collections. So how do we analyze the methodology? There are two ways, right? You can do it externally and you can do it internally. Externally is you examine the principles presented by the hadith scholars as outsiders. This is a lot more challenging, and I'll share a couple of reasons why. And then internally is examining the principles presented by the hadith scholars through their lens, right? Actually going into the science and sitting down and spending time with them and understanding what mechanisms were in place in order to help them actually grade these hadith. So external, there are two examples I want to share. A man went to Abu Hatim. Abu Hatim, very famous hadith critic. His son also, a very famous hadith critic, and asked him about a series of a hadith, and Abu Hatim gave his ruling. So basically he's like, what do you think about this hadith? He was like, da'if. What do you think about this hadith? Saqim. What do you think about this hadith? Sahih. And he started, and this guy, he's just listening to him make these rulings on these hadith. And for somebody who's not familiar, what are they going to think? That this guy is what? Right, he's just making stuff up. There's no way. This guy's just making stuff up. He's just like coming, like he's just shooting off the hip, and he's just saying this and that, X, Y, Z. It's not possible that he actually is saying something that makes sense. And it just appeared totally haphazard to this guy. He says to him, he's like, what is this? Ilm al-Ghaib? Like you have some like unseen knowledge here that you're saying like this is okay, this is this, this is this, this is this. And the second situation, he's Abu Zura. Abu Zura was actually him and Abu Hatim were both in Ray at this time, so which is in modern day Iran. Both hadith scholars, both near each other. He was asked about the weakening of a particular hadith, and he told him there's such and such narrative in this hadith, and this is the reason why this hadith is weak. And the guy was like, what are you talking about? The interesting is, it both told them to go verify with someone else. He said, okay, you don't trust me, no problem. Go talk to so and so. See what he says about these same hadith. And he said, I will guarantee you what? He's going to give you the same exact conclusions. So this idea of authenticating, this idea of verifying is something that even it's a very logical thing. The problem is, if I don't understand the mechanism, I'm not going to understand the rulings and why he gave them. So Ibn Abi Hatim, he said, a hadith is weighed according to its narrators and the speech being prophetic. So there are two parts here that he is actually talking about that are worthy of being criticized in a hadith. And these are some terminologies we'll become a little bit familiar with later on, but maybe some of you know them. What are the two things he's talking about here? He's talking about the chain, for sure. And he's talking about the text. This is very important. So not only is it in hadith that we analyze the chain, but we also have to look at what? What is being said. It's not enough. It's not enough that I look at the chain by itself. I actually have to look at what's being said, because that will take an effect on the ruling of that particular hadith.
Is it fair to say that the chain analyzation part is a lot easier than the text analyzing? Like it seems like each person can analyze the chain, but determine whether the speech is prophetic.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely more challenging, right? It's definitely more challenging because the only person who can, basically their ears had become so attuned to how the Prophet ﷺ spoke. What would happen the moment that they felt something was off? Then they would go and explore. They'd be like, okay, that doesn't sound like the Prophet ﷺ. And they would go and they would explore it. So it requires a knowledge of the eloquence of the Prophet ﷺ, for sure, to even have that indication. The thing with the chain is it's two-part. Like superficially, I agree with you 100%. The problem is, okay, if I know that two narrators didn't actually meet, that requires a little bit more, you know what I mean? Like, because, okay, well, they lived at the same time, you know what I mean? Like, it's possible that they met, but there are some scholars Ahmad, Daraqutni, Nasa'i, for example, these are considered great critics of hadith, and they're like, well, I know these two people didn't meet. They didn't narrate from each other. But there's no way for me to know that, right? Because I'm just looking at it superficially. So that is the science of ilal, and that does require a little bit more depth. But in general, you're right. Like, you can look at a hadith superficially, and you'll be able to tell, like, okay, yeah, it looks sound.
I mean, not to say
Yeah.
easy.
No. I completely. I agree with you, because the second one requires a little bit, like, you have to have your attuned ear for that, right? To know that if this is prophetic or not, your ear needs to be a little bit attuned. Versus a chain. A chain is just pure knowledge of understanding, okay, where these people were and what they were doing. So internally, this requires a depth of knowledge, right? And you have to study the science. There's no way. There's no way for me to actually grade a science without actually spending time in studying it. So how do we logically deal with reports? So forget hadith for a moment. I want to kind of take a step back, because we're talking about coming to logical conclusions. If a piece of information reaches me, and I know we touched a little bit on this in the usul class, but I have a piece of information. What do I do with this information now? Somebody comes and tells me something. Somebody comes and tells me that Ahmed is standing outside. What do I do?
If you want to take action, you first verify that information.
Okay, I can verify it. What are the methods of verification? This is a question.
How trustworthy is the person?
Okay, how trustworthy is this person? What else?
How reliable is the source?
How reliable is the source? Good. I mean, and these are all reasonable, right? I think these are all very logical means that we use every day to deal with information that comes to us. We have to have a filter. There has to be a filter there. We can't. What do we call somebody who accepts everything that they're told? We call them gullible, right? Or we'll call this person naive. But is this a praiseworthy trait, that somebody accepts everything that they're told? Absolutely not. You know, we as a whole, as a community, we don't think that's something that's praiseworthy. Like, as humanity, like, nobody thinks that's praiseworthy. So what happens here is that I judge a report to be true based on how close that report is to reality. And if it is in line with reality, then I judge that report to be true. Like, what if it opposes reality? Right? It's like, oh, did you guys see that horse flying when you came in? Right? This is something, it completely defies reality. So there are only two ways. If a person purposely defies reality, this is a lie. If a person doesn't do it on purpose, what is this? Wait, this is a mistake. This is not, like, and this happens. And this is in general how we deal with reports. If something reaches me and I know that this person purposely is telling me something that is against reality, then we will call this a lie. And if a person is mistaken, or a person isn't doing it on purpose, then we will say that this is a mistake. The same thing with this information. If it is free of lies or mistakes, then this piece of information is what? It's valid, it's true. And if it has a lie or a mistake in it, it is? False. What if I can't tell?
It's still false.
Is it?
Or neither.
It's neither. And it is this point that it's indiscernible. I don't know I can't do anything with this information. I can't act on it, but I also can't refute it. So if I said to you today in Ukraine, 1,000 people died. Is it possible?
Yes.
Yes. You don't know where I'm getting the information from.
But it could be false.
It could be false. Because maybe it's 900 people. Maybe it's 1,100. But there's no way of determining. And this lack of determinants is something that you even have when it comes to ruling on particular hadith. If a scholar cannot draw a conclusion on a particular hadith, he will do something that is called tawaqquf. He'll stop. He'll do the same thing that is happening here. When we do, and we do this a lot. Somebody brings us, like, if I have conflicting reports, in general, what will we do?
Try to reconcile.
We'll try to reconcile them. If it doesn't seem reconcilable, we kind of leave it, and we move on. So these we accept, these we clearly reject, and the indiscernible ones, what do we do? Non-commitment. Yeah, we reserve judgment. Like, until I'm able to, what? Like example. Until I'm able to bring more information, until I'm actually able to verify it. If I can't verify it, then I have to stay at this point of non-commitment. What about the scholars of hadith? Do you think that they logically came to these same three conclusions or no? If these are conclusions that we came to independently, right? Independent of the hadith corpus, independent of the science. Do you think that the same type of logic or the same type of process applies to them or no?
Sure.
Absolutely. What would be different? Is there a fourth category here that you guys can think of? Out of those three? Accept, reject, or non-commitment. Is there a fourth or fifth category that we should add in there?
Close to true, close to false, something like that. You know?
But those are going to be a spectrum, right?
Okay.
Between them.
Gray area.
Right, there's going to be always going to be gray areas, but are they categories in and of themselves? Because if you start putting categories to the gray areas, is there a limit?
Well, you said guy who did that.
For sure. No. I agree, and I'm totally with you. The question comes like, okay, how? And we'll get to that because there was an evolution to that point. The question comes, okay, how did he come to that conclusion? Why did he feel that 5 were the necessary ones? And inshallah, we'll talk about that. And why it's actually. So even though I said Ibn Hajar is the one who came up with this specific type of categorization, I think it's the one that we should continue using today. And I have my reasons for that. So what are conditions for an acceptable hadith? Now these are the conditions the scholars of hadith actually put forward. What do you think those conditions are? And some of you might be familiar, some of you might not be, it's okay. All right, the chain has to be connected, for sure. What else? What about the narrators themselves? What are some characteristics that you think that are important that the narrator should have?
Trustworthy.
All right, he has to be trustworthy, for sure. And what else?
They're not known to commit major topics.
Sure. So we'd put that under trustworthy. What else? And he has to be precise in what he's doing. So a person can be upright, he can be religious, but if he's forgetful, can I rely on what he's going to say? No. Is he doing it purposely? No. But there's a higher possibility for him to actually what? To what? To make a mistake, right? To make a mistake. So here, probity is it's a real word. I promise I didn't make it up. But this is adala. This is what we call trustworthiness or uprightness. And then precision. This is dhabt, right? This is what we talked about when we spoke about precision. Having a connected chain, ittisal al-sanad. Now the scholars of hadith, they added 2. They added 2 more conditions. Adam illa wa adam shudud, right? So these are the 2 other conditions that they've actually added in. What does that mean? So over here, no hidden defects that would cause the report to be rejected. What do you guys think that means? And the word hidden here is a key.
Is it the issue with the text?
It can be with the text. So a text will give an indication that there's definitely a problem. Right? So when I'm dealing with the matan and I look at it and it doesn't sound prophetic, immediately what am I going to do? Right, I'm going to start investigating further. Right? Because you're like, okay, this doesn't sound prophetic. So I'm going to investigate further, for sure.
Something like 2 of the narrators not having that.
That's a perfect example. Or, so basically a hidden defect, the scholars have boiled it down to 2. Right? Either it's going to be inqita' ittisal or al-waqf rafa. And what does that mean? Meaning that a narrator, at some point, you look at these people and you're like, okay, well, everybody is adil, everybody is dhabit, every person in this chain is trustworthy, every person in this chain has precision, and the chain is connected. So now, me, as the hadith investigator, I'm going to take this hadith and say it as what? I'm going to be like, this hadith is sahih, this hadith, it looks good, because superficially it all looks good. Tayyib, one of the narrators made a mistake. How do I know he made a mistake? That's shudud, and that's the next category. How do I know that this narrator made a mistake?
Something didn't highlight something.
How do I know that? Everything looks good.
Maybe sometimes he can confuse who he took from.
So you're talking about the reasons, and I agree with you 100%. That it could have been waham, he could have been confused. Sometimes they have something that's called rakb al-sanad al-sanad. That sometimes they use so many ahadith in a particular chain, is that sometimes they'll put one chain onto another hadith. And they'll be mistaken. And this happens. But how do I know it happened? Yes?
I think you said something about the defects, the hidden defects, like maybe the information about when it was published, how it was published, where it was published. Maybe that was
sure.
I think is incorrect. For example, if we look at the year, we know it's 100% wrong. It doesn't match the year, for example, when was wrong.
Okay, but is that hidden?
No.
That's something that's clear and apparent.
Well, if it's hidden, how did you know it's there?
That's what I'm asking.
Unless you hid it, then
in your pocket, right?
yeah.
How do I know it's hidden?
Seriously,
All of a sudden, the science got a little bit more complicated than you guys imagined, huh?
context?
No.
Well, it says hidden, so you can see it.
You have to go back to the books of ilal. You have no choice. There are literally books that collect hidden defects. The most famous of them, Masal Imam Ahmed. The most famous of them, Ilal Darqutni. These are very, very famous books, voluminous works, where all they do is they talk about this person didn't meet this person, he accidentally attributed it to the Prophet ﷺ when it was actually a statement of one of the narrators. This person actually, this situation actually never even happened. This chain, he put this chain on top of this one, and this chain is not supposed to be there. That is the only way for me to determine if there's a illah, if there's a hidden defect. Because me, as a hadith observer, me as a hadith researcher, I can only deal with what? I can only deal with the superficial, with what's in front of me. Can I go to this narrator's neighbor and ask about him?
No.
Can I go to where he shops and talk with the shopkeeper? Hey, does this guy come around here and he shop here? Think about that. When we're talking about nuqad, when we're talking about the major hadith critics, why did they explore? Why did they go around? Why did they travel so much? Because they're going and asking about these different narrators. You think some guy just sat down one day and he was like, okay, Muhammad ibn Khalid, he was a liar, and and Muhammad ibn Ahmed, That's not how it worked. Every time that they would have a series of narrators, they would ask their teachers, they would ask their students, they would ask where they shopped, they would ask where they spent their time, they would ask the people in the village where he was from, they would ask where this individual traveled to. They would go to those places that person traveled to, and they'd be like, did so-and-so actually sit with you? Did he record your hadith? The level of precision and the level of ta'ab, right, the exhaustion that these scholars went to in order to verify prophetic reports, it is mind-boggling. It is literally mind-boggling. The efforts that these individuals went to protect the prophetic sunnah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And it is a sign of their love for him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the efforts that they went through, in the sacrifices that they made, just to find out sometimes about one narrator. We can't even come to classes. And the last one, this is وَعَدَمَ الشُّذُوذ. So basically, if I had 7 narrations that said, the Prophet ﷺ went to Baqi, he went to Baqi, he went to Baqi, he went to Baqi, he went to Khurasan. What am I going to do? Immediately, what should happen? Right, I have a red flag there. Okay, there's something wrong here. You have 6 people telling me he went to this place, and then you have 1 person telling me he went somewhere else. What's going to happen? I have to question it. I have to question it, that there's something wrong here. Is it possible the Prophet ﷺ took another trip? Possible. Or is it more likely that the person actually made a mistake in reporting where he went? And when does this happen? This means that I have to have a number of reports in order to help me determine what actually happened and how to differentiate between them. And sometimes you have something that you can take the information as additional. Sometimes you can reject the information. It really depends. Like, there's a lot of context and there's a lot of exploration that happens here. Dave, is there a 6th condition that we should put here?
What do you mean we should read there?
I don't know. This, again, in order to see if something is sound, I have to what? I have to question it. And I have to challenge it. This is ijma'. There's agreement amongst the muhaddithin on these 5 conditions.
Question.
Yes?
But would like the method like goes against like what is known of the Quran? Could that be
Sure. So what would you, all of those things, what would I do at that point? Because for individuals, there are a number of things. If something goes against the majority of the hadith corpus, that is going to be a red flag. If something goes against the Quran, that's immediately going to be a red flag. If something goes against the maqasid al-sharia, right, against the goals, this is an overarching theme that we see in the Quran and we see in the Sunnah, and all of a sudden you have one hadith that goes against that. At that point, those should all be red flags for me to do what? I have choices now. What do I do at that point? I can explore, right? And what are the things I'm going to explore for? If I'm going to explore, I'll be like, okay, is there something wrong with the chain? Let me check that first.
Okay.
The chain looks okay. What do I do at that point? I'll be like, okay, no, there has to be a hidden defect. There has to be a problem. If I can't find there's a problem, then what do I do?
Let's see if there's an individual report.
All right, we've done all that. Now what do I do? At the end, I'm like, okay, I can't find a defect here. What do I do?
We look at other narrations compared to other.
So that's what I can start doing. I can be like, okay, well, this is actually opposing other narrations, even if it looks sound. Therefore, I can reject it.
Sure.
Or I can do tarjih. I can be like, okay, yeah, this hadith is there, but there are too many other hadith to oppose it, so I'm going to take that opinion, right, which is also a possibility. The other one is I can do something that's called reconciliation. It's like, okay, well, it's not possible the Prophet ﷺ would say something that clearly goes against the religion, so there has to be what? There has to be some kind of context there to help me understand what that is and a way to reconcile it with the rest of the hadith corpus. So these are different academic tools that are definitely available there, but the first one would be some type of red flag. I'm sorry?
Do you think it's fair to say there's ijma, like, I don't know, amongst the Shafi'i muhaddithin?
So most of the muhaddithin were Shafi.
What is it?
So, even most of the people, listen, Hakim, Khatib Baghdadi, who else? Suyuti, Ibn Hajar, like everyone Shafi. Like, is rarely, like, you have a handful that are not, Ibn Rajab, Hanbali, but even like the great scholars who compiled, for example, Ilm al-Rijal, Imam al-Mizzi, Shafi. It's very,
Abu Hatim.
Abu Hatim al-Razi. Yeah, Bayhaqi. Bayhaqi, not only was he Shafi, he was a hardcore Shafi. He was a hardcore Shafi. He actually has a manaqib where he'll go and defend Shafi's positions using a hadith. These are very early scholars. These are not these are not later scholars. So and I don't think this is what you intended, but what has happened now also, what I've seen in the modern area, is that they have this thing, they talk about like usul al-hadith and al-Shafi'iyya, usul al-hadith and al-Ahnaf. I don't think there's such a thing. I don't think there's such a thing where there are actually different rulings on how to grade a hadith, how to understand them. Yes, that I'm okay with, because when you're extracting rulings, you have a pecking order in how you deal with those texts, and that pecking order, it's going to be different from school to school, and how to reconcile them, the awareness, the strength of qiyas in one madhab over another, the strength of masalih and potential pros and cons in one madhab over the other. That I'm okay with. But how to actually grade a hadith, I don't think there's a difference. Yeah.
Right. For example, connected chain. Some schools accept a connected chain. That is like an acceptable hadith.
So acceptable for what? Do you understand? They're not going to say this. Yeah, so they might utilize it for legal rulings because they think that it has the strength to be utilized to help derive a ruling, because there might be other supporting texts for that. Or it's the best thing in that chapter concerning whatever the issue is. Does that make sense? But they can't come and say, now this hadith is connected. Or they're not going to go against the ijma' muhaddithin.
If they do go against it, they still have to accept that.
Yeah, they still have to accept these conditions. Yeah. So for example, they can definitely say, like, is it possible that I use a weak hadith to give me some rulings?
Well, they wouldn't consider it weak, but we don't have to.
I'm saying no. But the thing is, there's a couple things. Is it because of application?
Because of the methodology difference.
Then we'd have to see that,
yeah.
And that's something that deserves exploration. But one of the most famous writers to actually, he's I don't want to say he's the one who's kind of spearheaded this movement, but like there's a scholar called Turkmani. He's one of the ones who's actually come up with this idea that no, there's actually different methodologies between the muhaddithin. But if we go back to, because you have to go back to the classical books. You're talking about, like, so Ibn Salah, he was 5th century. And he was the one that is basically considered one of the biggest pioneers in Hadith terminology literature. He was also Shafi'i, right? But he was like, he basically said, we are now live in an era where we cannot make rulings on a hadith.
What time was he alive?
He was 423.
Oh, so.
Yeah. Even though he ruled, like, so you can go back and he has an explanation of Muslim. It's called Siyan al-Sahih Muslim, and he also has a fiqh book where he rules on certain hadith. But he was ruling on the asanid, on the chains, and not on the hadith themselves. And we'll talk about why that is, inshallah. But we're jumping ahead 5 generations. So adala, this is the first condition. I don't think we'll be able to finish this, but we'll go ahead and get started, inshallah. Or should we stop here?
Go for it.
Go for it? Okay. Close. So defined as many as the imbibed state of an individual that forces him to adhere to the characteristics of piety and chivalry. This is what adala is. Imam Ghazali, this is from his Mustasfa. Khatib Baghdadi, he brings the same definition, and I think Hakim, he also brings the same definition. Explained as the religiosity that prevents an individual from following that which opposes it, namely major sins or associated minor sins. Why is religiosity so important when it comes to trustworthiness? Why include that there?
Because this report is going to be used for religious purposes.
Okay, but is it not enough for a person who is known to be trustworthy to come forward? Let's assume they're Muslim.
Can anybody do it?
Okay. If they're not Muslim, can we accept the report of a non-Muslim on the Prophet ﷺ? No. Why? Huh? Because they dirty coopers. Allah guide us. Yeah.
Well, I mean, for the purposes of like religion, no. But
Yeah.
like for like history, we need to verify like for the purposes of like verifying Sirah, we can use like reports from like we can see what the Romans said at the time or like what Jews said at the time to verify things from the Sirah.
Okay, so those might be. So we're not going to use them to verify. We could use them to corroborate, which is which is a little bit different. But we're not going to. Why is that? How come we're not as invested in non-Muslim sources as we are in Muslim sources when it comes to the Prophet ﷺ?
Because they were probably weren't around him.
He was surrounded by pagans, right?
Like at
Yeah.
other times.
Huh?
Like at
'Cause-
they were around other times.
Okay. Huh.
Their integrity could be compromised.
Absolutely. Right.
Whereas, like, if you're religious, your integrity is rooted in like something way.
So if I believe something, what are the chances of me violating it? Like when I'm not Muslim, am I invested in the Prophet ﷺ? Am I invested in the religion? What purpose? So any report that comes to me, even if it goes against, and it's clear that there's some type of bias or evil against the Prophet ﷺ, will I care about relating it? No, because I'm not invested. And it's a very. I'm going to draw a parallel with something else. You have a number of scholars that say when it comes to issues that are regard fasting, you should go see a Muslim doctor. Why? Because non-Muslims are incompetent? Then why? Why should I see the Muslim doctor?
They recognize the importance of fasting.
Exactly, because they're invested, right? They are spiritually, religiously invested in this, and they understand the importance to who? They understand the importance to me. The non-Muslim, his priority is what? The non-Muslim doctor, what is going to be his number one priority? Health. That's it, right? It's what is best for your health is what you should do. For the non-Muslim, that spiritual health is going to be number one. Then your physical health will be number two.
For the non-Muslims.
For the Muslim, I'm sorry, yeah. I mean, you guys understand what I'm saying. A lot of non-Muslims better than Muslims, right? No. So, and the religiosity is an important addition here because if a person is religiously they're not going to what? Not just compromise. What else? Something even greater.
They're not gonna lie on
They're not going to lie.
They might be mistaken. They're not gonna lie.
Because right now, what are we talking about? Mistaken has to do with precision.
Yeah.
But over here, we're actually talking about adala. We're talking about the trustworthiness of a person. So what are some examples that would remove a person from being trustworthy? Lying in general, even if it's not on the Prophet ﷺ, and very specifically lying on the Prophet ﷺ. And we have to understand that lying, it has to go back to the logical reasons of why we reject reports. Right? If I get a piece of information from somebody I know to be a liar, what are the chances of me accepting that report? Zero. I'm not going to accept it. I was like, this guy, I know he lies. Is it possible a liar tells the truth? Absolutely, right? That's definitely possible. But even in that situation, the muhaddithin, if they have a chain that has a liar in it, but the matan is sahih, we know that this is something the Prophet ﷺ actually said, what is the ruling on that chain? Do you guys know? It's still daif. Still daif.
So it has to satisfy both.
Exactly. It doesn't mean that what the Prophet ﷺ didn't say this, but it means what? That there's a problem in the chain.
Could you
Yeah.
take out that narration?
Absolutely.
And then make it?
Yeah. So you because how do I know it's sahih?
What we just discussed before, the 5 criteria.
Well, not just that, but I have other chains. I don't need to rely on this one, and this is why it's okay for me to make a ruling on this specific particular chain. So here, what is the difference between these two? They're saying two things. They're saying that this individual, it's not enough to know that he doesn't lie. I have to know that he is truthful. What is the difference between these two?
It goes to what someone is known for rather than their reality.
Okay.
So it's like, we never heard you lie.
Yeah.
But we still don't know you to tell us.
We don't know you. No, we still don't know you, right? Because in this situation, this person is essentially what? No, the first one. I'm sorry.
Unknown.
He's unknown. He's still majhul. He still don't know him. Like in just a general example of this, like why do we lock our doors? Because everybody's untrustworthy.
No.
You just don't know them. Right? I just don't know them. It's not because I think people are dangerous and they're out to get me and you know what I mean? Systemic racism, right? No, so
It's just 1% that we're afraid of.
where's Kyle? Where's Kyle when I need him, man?
That's a real thing.
Right? So, it's not that, okay, it's because I don't trust individuals. Sorry, it's an inside joke. Yeah, I know, I was you know what I mean? Shout out Kyle. So, like, there are situations where it's like, okay, no, I block these people, I don't deal with these people, I don't accept their narrations. Why? Because I don't know them. And you actually have this situation, you have this case in Asanid. This narrator would actually be called majhul. He'd be called unknown. And that is enough for me to what? Not to take from that narration. Now, can I use supporting evidences to deal with it? Yes, and we'll talk about that when we actually deal with specific asanid, inshallah. And we'll stop there. I'll give you guys a few minutes, and then we'll come back for the tazkiyah class. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqin, nabiyina Muhammad wa alihi sahbihi wa sallam. Any questions before we end today?
The person who's unknown is similar to someone who's not Muslim in terms of taking from them, right? You can use their reports in conjunction with other reports.
So with majhul, it doesn't mean that he's like completely unknown, like because you have layers to majhul, right? Mm-hmm. So majhul basically is this. I don't have enough information about him. Mm-hmm. Can I use some supporting evidences? Like, so for example, if his teacher is upright and sound and trustworthy, and the student is upright and sound and trustworthy, does that give me a little bit of an indication who this guy is? It does, right? You know what I mean? Just a little bit. So can I, and like what he's narrating, it falls in line in general with the Islamic corpus. He's not adding any new rulings, but there is something that he's sharing something beneficial. Can that bring that up a little bit? You know what I mean? So you have all of these supporting evidences that can be used to kind of raise the level of the hadith. But essentially, that would be the situation where we talk about where it's indiscernible because you just don't have enough information. Sometimes what happens is that, okay, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Number 3 is unknown here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Number 4 is unknown here. But they're saying the same thing. The problem is it's possible that this person is what? It's the same person.
The same person in the chain.
Yeah, he's just lower in the chain here and he's higher in the chain here. So, you know what I mean? So you do have these issues that can definitely come up. But like I said, hadith it's more in depth than I think a lot of people give it credit to.
As difficult as calculus?
I don't know. Calculus for some people is easy. But we'll say, any other questions? No. We'll talk about and we'll discuss some of these examples later on, inshallah.
There's a question, there's
Okay.
a comment that you make
Because, you know,
that Ibn Salah saying that we cannot make judgments.
Yeah.
But in the past century, we've seen Mashayikh make,
Yeah.
right? They bring up books.
Sure. That Sahih, Hasan, Da'if,
Yes.
kida, yeah.
They try to regrade almost all the books. So how is that?
So there's a couple of problems with that. So in this generation, you do have some scholars who've come up with grading. So there are certain scholars like Shu'aib al-Arnaut and his team and the people who do that. They very clearly say that we are making rulings on the asanid, that we're making rulings on the chain. I have no problem with that. I'm completely fine with that. But to come and say I'm making a ruling on the hadith itself, this is extremely problematic because we have so many chains that have been lost to us.
Is that what Sheikh Albani was doing?
So Sheikh Albani is a little bit different. The problem with Sheikh Albani is that, and he's actually the reason I started studying hadith. He was actually one of the biggest motivators for me. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on him. There are a lot of good things that he implemented, and he started with the culture, challenging the status quo, asking for proofs for certain things, and this is something that really wasn't done before, before he became popular and famous. The problem with him is in his methodology. So what would happen is that, these five here, he was really good at these three. He didn't really touch this at all. Even in which book was actually missing in the Damascus library? Ilal Daraqutni. How can you make a complete ruling without going through books of ilal? It's extremely problematic. So this is why, for this, where can I more, I would say, where would a more trustworthy ruling come in if I only had these three tools? When it came to making a hadith what? Weak. Right? Because these are more hidden issues. But if I only had apparent tools, then it becomes that much easier for me to what? To make a ruling on a hadith that it is weak. I can't, because I need this. In order to say because I need to know for sure that these people met, that there's no mistakes, that this is actually something that the Prophet ﷺ said. And you very soon, like if you go through a silsila sahiha, there's a hadith that says is sahih where you have all of the nuqad, Ahmad, Nasa'i, Bukhari, all of them are like this hadith ma'lul. There's a hadith that has a clear illah in it, and he says it's sahih. So there is that problem that's there for sure. Now, did he rule on a hadith or did he rule on asanid? I don't know. I'd actually have to go back. I can't imagine him saying that this, like I have the same resources that were available to all of the hadith critics in the past. They're just not. Like we know asanid are lost. We know it. Saying that, I have full confidence that everything the Prophet ﷺ said or did has reached us. I have full confidence in that. Do I have full confidence that every single chain has reached us? No. This is why I don't feel we can rule on those hadiths, because those chains are gone. Just like books are gone, just like other things are missing.
Sheikh, I have a question. What was the name, Sheikh Albani?
Yeah.
Maybe this question is random, but how was he a sheikh if he didn't focus on the last point? Like, when other people have made comments that he didn't focus on points 4 and 5, that he shouldn't be a sheikh or something?
So the thing is, that's more of like an Islamic history discussion. But basically what happened after Imam as-Suyuti, you had the rise of the Ottoman Khilafah. The Ottoman Khilafah, there was some advancement in fiqh, but there wasn't a lot of advancement in hadith. The hadith advancement started probably with like Albani and Ahmad Shakir, and they were in the previous century. You're talking about like Ahmad Shakir was like I think he died in like what, in the 1930s or 1940s? Yeah, and Sheikh Albani, he died like I think in 1990s. So this revival of actually going in and doing takhrij and like grading asanid, it was very much a modern phenomenon. Like you had about, you're talking about like 400 years where this wasn't actively happening. Basically whatever was in the books, that was good, and that's what we're going to go with, and that's how we're going to deal with it. Even the rise of publication. This is like a very modern phenomenon. It's a very, you're talking about within the past 60, 70 years where books are published to this scale. Before that, books weren't really published. No. And there are a number of reasons for that, right? Like, so the printing press, paper technologies, ink technologies, like all of these made a big difference. Now, the biggest technology that has made a difference is computers. Half my library is on my iPad. You know, it's not a good or bad thing, right? This is just how technology, how we consume data, how we consume information, and everything's changed. I think we spoke about the technology scale, right? Technology scale, it doesn't look like this. What does it look like? Exponential. It's exponential, right? It goes like this. So when technologies move, they move very quickly. I hope that helped answer some of the question. And the thing is, over here, this doesn't show that you're ignorant, but it does show that the knowledge was incomplete. Right, or I won't say the knowledge, I would say the method was incomplete. Because for me to know, like the number of narrators that even on his deathbed, he would ask his students about narrators and says like, so-and-so is suduq. And he'd be like, is that what Ibn Hajar said? They would go back to the books, they'd be like, yes, Sheikh. He'd like, like coming in and out of his coma, he's still reviewing narrators in his head. Allah yarhamhu. You know what I mean? So people give their life. They're giving their life to the Prophet ﷺ. Are there shortcomings? Did they make mistakes? Yeah, absolutely, man. I don't doubt that. Are there huge gaps? But I know what those gaps are now. So what do? I can come in. I can come and fill them. And it doesn't mean that we just you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You can't. Yeah, you give him credit where credit is due. Are there some harms and problems that came about? Yes, absolutely, man. But I don't think we can completely discredit him. And we have to appreciate what he did. I'm saying I have access to tools today to help me do takhrij of a hadith. And basically what will happen is I can put in a hadith and it will give me every single reference point of where that hadith is. Albani, he will have some books that I don't even have in the program. Like it just shows how meticulous the guy was. I'm just saying, again, we can't discredit where credit is due. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on him and give us tawfiq. Wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqin nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sallam.
Was he Hanbali?
He was actually pretty Hanafi.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
A lot of people don't know.
His methodology on taking hadith. I know how they say that Imam Ahmed he took a lot of hadith narrations that weren't necessarily considered to be sahih.
Yeah.
Is it similar to Albani's approach in that way?
resurrection over the heads of all creatures and ask him to choose any of the bright and large-eyed maidens he wishes. طيب. So over here, number one, I guess the question I have here is, why is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is focusing on men versus women? Or why is the Prophet ﷺ mentioning men instead of women? Huh?
Aren't men more prone?
I'm sorry?
Men are more prone to
Men are more prone to anger.
Maybe this is the wrong answer, but I think in the Quran it says الرجال قوامون على النساء, but they're not allowed to show their anger.
So because they're given positions of authority, so there's more chance of what? Of abuse of that authority. That's good. I don't think that's the wrong answer. What else?
Maybe he was talking to men.
Huh?
Maybe he was talking to men.
Maybe he was talking to men. It's very much a possibility. What else? When it comes to violent interactions, what percentage of men versus women are involved in violent interactions? Violent interactions. It's like I think I want to say 97-3. Yeah. No. I'm saying it's like 97-3. So it's like for every 100 encounters that are violent, 97 of them are men. And what does this show us?
Is there a source for that?
Yeah, there's statistics. There are a number of statistics. Yeah, violent crime. Just look, all you have to do is look at violent crime.
Yeah.
Who are the perpetrators of violent crime?
I thought it was like 85, but 97.
I mean, maybe.
Of course, I'm part of the 3%.
MashaAllah. Allahumma barik. Allahumma barik. Ladies, he's single. So here, so over here, the women are going to be like, oh, he inshallah, you'll get this in paradise, right? So over here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Wallahu alam, and like I said, there could be a number of reasons for this. Because they're put in positions of authority, then it's more likely that they can abuse those positions. Also, they tend to be more violent than women. And this is just statistics, these are just numbers, and this is a possibility of why he sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was addressing men. Umar radiallahu anh said, whoever has taqwa of Allah, then rage will never consume him. Whoever fears Allah, then he will not do as he pleases. And had it not been for the day of judgment, what you see would be very different. What do you guys think about that? Or what are some things that stand out for you?
In the last one, had it not been for the what you see would be very different. Does that mean like how we would express ourselves or how we would be different? Okay.
Yeah. Because the day of judgment, what is unique about the day of judgment?
Accountability,
right? It's clear accountability. And if I wasn't accountable, then like people would just do whatever they want. Luqman said to his son, do not mark the brilliance of your face with begging. Your rage will not be cooled by being exposed. Know yourself, the way you live will benefit you. And this is something that we've stressed on time and time again. If I want to be able to control my rage, if I want to control my anger, if I want to be courageous, I have to what? I have to know myself. Right? I have to have that conversation with myself. I have to look in the mirror and look at those characteristics that I don't like. And if I'm able to recognize characteristics that I don't like, what does that mean? Like I might not even like the person that I'm looking at in the mirror. It's very possible. Is that a bad thing?
Not necessarily.
No? Okay. Why is it not bad?
You recognize the issues with them. Whoever they be.
Okay. So there's recognition and awareness there. How many people go through life without that awareness?
97.
97? And 3% of the other 3%, mashallah. So here you have that the fact that I'm able to recognize these shortcomings and have this awareness. What does that mean, and what kind of indication can I take from that? There's hope for me to change. And how do I know that? Because had Allah willed, I wouldn't have what? I wouldn't have seen those defects, and I wouldn't have seen those shortcomings. Just the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put this light in my heart to be able to see those shortcomings, it is a blessing from Him Azza wa Jal, the ability to now change that. Sufyan al-Thawri, Abu Khuzaymah al-Yarbu'i, and Fulayl ibn Iyad, they all gathered to discuss zuhud. And they came to the conclusion that the best action is to show forbearance when angry and patience with greed. So over here, this patience with greed, we talked about this a little bit. This is delayed gratification. And this idea of delayed gratification is one of the tools and one of the ways for us, inshallah, to enter paradise. Right? We withhold ourselves in this world in hopes for what? for good in the next. And this is a very important skill. And for those of you who have children or are planning on having children, just instilling this idea of delayed gratification can help them avoid so many pitfalls and so many issues. Inshallah, we'll come back after Salah. Sallallahu ala khair khalqi nabiyina Muhammad wa alihi wa sallam. Very different idea. Walaikum salam. So this idea of restraining anger, making sure that we're channeling it correctly, make sure that we're dealing with it appropriately, this is what matters. Like getting angry, we had said there's nothing wrong with getting angry. Even the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he used to anger. A man said to Umar, I swear by Allah, you do not judge justly nor distribute evenly. Umar angered to the point where it was visible on his face. So a man said to him, Amir al-Mu'mineen, have you not heard Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statement? خُذِ الْعَفُوَ وَأْمُرْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَأَعْرِضْ عَنِ الْجَاهِلِينَ. Be tolerant and command what is right. Pay no attention to foolish people. And this individual is from the foolish. Umar said, you're right. If it was as if a flame had arisen, then was put out. So sometimes these spiritual reminders, they're very helpful. But other times it depends on the usage. So there are many times that we will have people will come and tell us about, don't get angry. The Prophet ﷺ said, "La taghdab." Is that usually what we want to hear in those situations? Usually not. And I find it interesting here. He actually doesn't say that, right? He doesn't tell him don't get angry. He just recites this ayah to him, and he uses it as a means hey, listen, and just kind of giving context to what he was experiencing and what was happening. But this idea of kind of beating people over the head with ayat and a hadith, it's just not healthy, and it doesn't help the situation. It can actually cause somebody to say something that is inappropriate, and we have to be careful in how we use them. It shouldn't be the first line of defense. Also, sometimes when you lose something or something breaks, what is a very common response in those situations? Huh? Okay. Huh? No, no, other people say to you, it's say salah on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's okay, it's not wrong, you know what I mean? And it kind of adds to the frustration because you're you can't say anything because he's not saying anything wrong. But at the same time, what is the response that we generally want to hear? What is the first thing that we would like to hear? Affirmation, right? At least some type of affirmation, okay, yeah, yes, I'll send salah on the Prophet @. Yes, I shouldn't get angry. Yes, I should make dua. Yes, I should be thankful. I get all that, but at least what? At least validate me. At least acknowledge that, I'm hurt. I really like that car. It's okay. You know what I mean? I had a little bit of attachment that's there. I didn't want to get into an accident. Now I got to drive around a rental for the next 2 weeks. You know what I mean? So these things are definitely right. These things are definitely problematic, and we shouldn't dismiss them. Muhammad ibn Ka'b, he said, whoever has the 3 following characteristics has complete belief in Allah. When he is pleased, he does not allow it to take him to evil. When he is angry, he does not allow it to take from the truth. Whenever anything happens, he will never take what is not his. So he won't justify. So if somebody takes his shoes, he'll go put on somebody else's slippers. You know what I mean? I don't know if you guys do women have that problem? Or is that a man thing? When they come into the masjid, our shoes get stolen? It's a man thing? Right, okay. Men be stealing shoes. It's just it's a big thing. I like giving the excuse okay, they mistook the shoes for someone else's. But it's okay, there's no way anybody mistake. You're not going to mistake $300 Jordans, right? So they're by excuse, they can only go so far. I know, right? It's they look just like mine, right? It's I could have sworn they look like my my Adidas slides. So these things, again, it's just a matter of channeling that anger, making sure that we're using it in the proper way. A man came to Salman and said, Abu Abdullah, advise me. Salman said, do not anger. He said, I'm unable to. I'm going to get angry. So he says here, whenever you anger, hold your tongue in hand. So this is, again, a piece of advice that usually the harm comes from where? It's either going to come from the tongue or from actually striking or actually hitting someone. So the next chapter here is the virtue of Helm, or the virtue of forbearance, or sabr. Know that sabr is better than suppressing anger. So over here, this is the opposite. So over there, he was talking about the lowest spectrum. The lowest spectrum is to actually suppress anger. Right? He's saying that that's the lowest spectrum. What we should actually be striving and achieving for is what? Is sabr. Right? We should actually be striving for Helm and sabr and forbearance and actually learning how to practice these things. He's saying suppressing anger is like a last resort. Right? You shouldn't even have to get to that point where you're enraged. You shouldn't get to that point where you're actually consumed. You should already develop that natural tolerance for this characteristic. And a lot of this is based on the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he says, Al-ilm bita'allum wa hilm bitahallum. That knowledge is by seeking it, and forbearance is by practicing it. So even if I don't have a characteristic, I can keep practicing that characteristic in order for that characteristic to become second nature. If I practice something enough, it actually becomes part of my nature. And that's basically what the message is here. If I want to be patient and I don't feel I'm patient enough, or I feel I'm impatient, I have to keep practicing it. And eventually what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to build up that tolerance. I'm actually going to build up, wow. I'm going to build up that emotional.
They're testing patience.
Yeah, they're testing something, right? So, you have to kind of build up that emotional stamina to deal with. I don't want to say wall, because building up an emotional wall is a bad idea. Don't do that.
Just a gate.
Huh?
Just a gate.
Yeah, because what's the difference between emotional tolerance and an emotional wall? Do you guys know?
Emotional tolerance is like tolerating how frustrated and how angry you can be.
Yes.
But the emotional wall, I think, is that preventing yourself from doing something you might regret.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. So an emotional wall is basically blocking. What happens is, like, regardless of the emotions that are being thrown at you, you kind of build up this wall. And how do you react? So you stonewall. Like, you know what I mean? You're just very stoic. You just don't react. You don't deal with the situation. And it's not healthy, because you end up frustrating the person that's in front of you. So we have to make sure that we develop an emotional tolerance and this emotional strength to make sure that we're interacting and reacting appropriately.
Sure, I have a question.
Tafadhal.
Sure. But what if it like reaches a position where somebody says, like, the society says, what's wrong with this guy, or like, what's wrong with this girl? They're so naive that, they're not standing up, or they're just letting the situation like continue. Like, when you control yourself.
Yeah.
Somebody, for example, he insults you or hits you.
Yeah.
But you, because you're a good person, you try to avoid insulting him back or hitting him back. But the society will say, look at this ignorant and naive person. Like, he doesn't even
defend himself. Yeah,
defend himself.
Okay. So, Dave, what do you guys think? How should a person respond in that situation?
Call the cops.
Call the cops. Okay. Call.
Okay,
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Like, this person is controlling their anger, etc., everything. But the question is now, if I have somebody who is being insulting, I have somebody who's being aggressive, what do I do? She's like, I need to be patient, right? We're not pacifists. That's a very important point. Like, a Muslim is not a pacifist. But what should I do? Huh? Okay, walk away. So it depends. Number one, it depends on the context and the nature of the relationship, right? So every time I'm upset with my wife, or my wife is upset with can we just walk away every time? It's like, huh? Right? You can, right? All right. Oh wow, that escalated like super quickly. Coworkers, your boss, right? So we have to understand there are a lot of relation dynamics that definitely do come into play. But let's just assume that these two people are friends, or they're colleagues, or they're they're associates. They just know each other, and one person is constantly abusive. What can I do in that situation? And we had talked about the three situations, right? When you're dealing with somebody who's in a position of authority, when you're dealing with a subordinate, and when somebody is on the same playing field as you. Right, you have to set boundaries, right? That's very important. How I set those boundaries depends on the nature of the relationship. So if I'm in a relationship where we're on the same playing field, how do I set that boundary?
You inform the other parties that, hey, what she did, said is not appropriate. I don't. You do your best to forgive first time, and let the person know.
Sure.
But then second time you can take more serious action.
So you brought up an interesting point. So there's a difference between forgiving and overlooking, right? So overlooking means what? I ignore it. Like, I don't even address it. Forgiveness can be part of that, right? Meaning that you overlook it and you don't address it. But the overlooking, where should that happen? In what type of relationships? With your superior? Maybe. If you're in a position of authority. Good. And in Islam, where is the position of authority? As a parent or as a? As a wali amr, oh sure, that's good. But I'm saying as a parent, it's another one that you guys are probably scared to say. As a husband, right? So as a husband, you should overlook what?
Some of the things that happen.
Some shortcomings of your wife. Why?
Because if you don't, then the situation can get worse and there will be fitna or fasad, then other people will...
Wow. Okay. Wow. That escalated all the way. I was looking for a different answer. I was gonna say because we have shortcomings, but I guess like
Each of them, then
I guess
you're not gonna look
no,
together.
not just that. Does it make sense with like in a husband-wife situation that we're constantly picking at each other's faults? No, it's not going to be a successful relationship. It's not going to be a successful marriage. So I should overlook why, because as a whole, it's what? Hopefully.
It's wrong.
Hopefully it's good, right? Hopefully the situation is good. Hopefully the relationship is good. He's single, sisters. So you look at the relationship as a whole, right? This is the important thing. Like I look at the relationship in context. I look at the relationship as a whole, and because of that, I'm willing to overlook these small things because I know about myself. I have what? I have shortcomings too, and that's where I think it's important. Like, even with friends, is it going to be as much? No, your tolerance is going to be less. Why? Because a friendship is what? Not just equal, it's voluntary, right? Do I need to be in a friendship? No. Is there anything tying me to this person? Like, no, I have to be friends with this person.
Co-signed alone.
Right, co-signed alone. But they're your business partner, you know? Right, it's beyond friendship at that point. But there are a number of different dynamics that are definitely at play. And when you have the more voluntary a relationship, right, the less tolerance we should have. But the problem is if you look, it's usually what? Yeah. It's usually the opposite. You know what I mean? Like, so the more voluntary a relationship, the more tolerant we tend to be, and the more restricted we are, the less tolerant we tend to be. You know, so like as a parent, did my son or daughter have a choice for me as a father? Right? And I didn't have a choice for them as a son or daughter. But we tend to have less tolerance. Like with wives, people who we chose, right? Like it's like so like we chose this woman, or like as a wife I chose this husband. I agreed consensually to this relationship, and I don't have a lot of tolerance. But with friends, people who we can literally just one day just walk away and be like, I don't want to be friends anymore, right? Like that's what a friendship is. We try so hard to hold on to them, and we really should change that perspective. Even the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Khayrukum li ahli wa ana khayrukum li ahli." The best of you is the one who is best to his wives or family, depending on how you translate it, and I am the best to my wives. And we have to learn to overlook. We have to learn to overlook. And forgiveness. So that was overlooking. What about forgiveness? What does forgiveness entail?
To acknowledge.
Okay, yeah, you definitely have to acknowledge, for sure. What else? Well, even if the other person doesn't acknowledge, can I still forgive them?
Yeah.
I can. I have that choice. But the thing that I want you guys to kind of take away is you own your forgiveness. Like if somebody wrongs me, I have a choice to forgive. Do I have to? No, I don't. I don't. And some people go, well, it's better to forgive. Yeah, it is. In general, it is definitely better to forgive. But does it make sense for me to force myself to forgive someone and constantly have that anger and hate in my heart?
No.
And is that true forgiveness?
No.
It's not. I haven't really left it up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I have every right to hold this person accountable, but can I constantly dangle it in that person's face? Right? I forgave this person from stealing $10 from me. And then every few weeks I was like, yeah, man, remember when you stole that $10 from me and I forgave you for that? Is that true forgiveness? No. You were oppressed initially, but now you have become what? You've become the oppressor. Because you're claiming to have forgiven this person, or even if you don't forgive this person, let's say you don't forgive this person, that's fine too, that's also your choice. But the moment I decide not to forgive this person, I have made an active decision that I have left his affair with what? I've left his affair with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there's no reason for me to what? To re-engage. I can't re-engage.
So this generation, too much forgiveness doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, too much of anything.
Yeah, too much
right?
forgiveness, they always take advantage of.
Yeah, Allah understand.
That's why I brought up the situation.
But that's not being forgiving, Yaki.
No,
That's actually being naive.
what do you mean?
So if somebody is constantly abusing me and I'm taking it, am I being forgiving, or am I using forgiveness as an excuse because I can't stand up for myself?
No, it's not because I can't stand.
Yes, it is. I guarantee, 90% of the time.
No, it's not.
Or maybe
what do
you
you mean physically? Well, physically?
Yaki, no.
What exactly?
Yaki, even verbally. If verbally somebody's constantly abusing me, and I choose to remain in that situation.
What if I said, oh, I said, and then I walk away?
Every single time?
No.
Now, how are you ending up in that situation again? This is a question that needs to be asked, Yaki. The first 2-3 times, khalas, I understand, maybe you bumped into him, maybe the situation. It's like, okay, are you looking for this person now? You know what I mean? That it's become 10, 15, 20 times? This is something that we really need to ask ourselves, like, why do I keep ending up in this situation? In Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, يعني ما حالكم? He says, كنا مستضعفين في الأرض. He said, what was your situation in this earth? And they said, we were weak and oppressed in the land. He said, أَلَمْ تَكُنْ أَرْضُ اللَّهِ وَاسِعَةً. It's like, what, was Allah's earth not wide enough for you to migrate therein? And he said, your place is in the hellfire. We are not allowed to be oppressive, nor are we allowed to put ourselves in situations where we are oppressed. If we don't have a choice, even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He goes on to say, إِلَّا الْمُسْتَضْعَفِينَ مِنْ رِجَالِ وَالنِّسَاءِ. You know what I mean? Like, except those individuals who are weak and elderly and the women. You know what I mean? Like, people who didn't have a choice, that's different. If you don't have a choice, you don't have a choice. Like, I'm voluntarily putting myself in a situation where somebody's talking down to me, yelling at me, oppressing me, beating me. Okay, no, man, I have to get out of that situation.
But I don't want to come and be, I don't want to hit him, for example.
See, that's the problem. No, but think about what you just said. You're saying that either I say nothing or I hit him.
Okay.
What do we call this? Extremism. That's all it is.
Binary.
It's very binary.
Let's say there's nothing else I can do. I can't complain about it because nobody's. Let's say I'm in a society where nobody's gonna care about the situation. Well, I can't, for example, tell him to stop because he's just gonna keep.
Listen, if you're talking about in a vacuum where you live in a world where it's just you and him and you can't do anything about it, there's nothing I can really advise you. There's nothing you can do. But we live in a society that involves a number of people. It's not just me alone. You know what I mean? It's not just you and him or him and her or whatever the case might be. Like, we live in a complex social structure. And just because, and many times, you guys have heard, I've tried everything. We've heard this. We've heard ourselves say this many times. What is the problem with that statement?
It's a lie.
It's a lie. There's no doubt. But how do we know it's a lie? It's a lie because it's everything I know I've tried. Does that make sense? So within my little pigeonhole view of the world, everything I know I've tried it. Is there a world around my worldview? What do I have to do to find out? Google. I can. And probably get some really bad advice like from Reddit or Quora, right? But what should I actually do? Seek advice. وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders us, He tells us. Go consult with people. The reason we don't want to consult is why? It's usually our own arrogance. Well, I tried everything. It's like, wow, you know everything too, mashallah. No, like we seek, this is why we seek counsel, because it's a sign of our own humility. It's a sign that we actually don't know everything and we need to talk to people to get more insight, to get, to help us with situations and issues. And many times we don't want to share those problems with others because we're afraid of how we'll look. To the extent that you can have, marriages will destroy, relationships with children will be destroyed, right? Your status might even be destroyed, but just because of our own egos, we will refuse to go and admit these things to anyone. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. So yeah, like we can't allow ourselves to be in situations where we're oppressed. And if I have no choice, at that point, what? I leave it to Allah. I have no choice. I just make dua and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to lift whatever problem it is. Because I can't do anything about it. I want to, but I can't. So here, this is an interesting situation. Allah's messenger, I have relatives with whom I try to have close relationship, but they sever this relationship. I treat them well, but they treat me ill. I am sweet to them, but they are harsh toward me. Upon this, he sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, if it is as you say, then you in fact throw hot ashes upon their faces, and there would always remain with you on behalf of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala an angel to support you, who would keep you dominant over them so long as you adhere to this path of righteousness. What do you guys think about this statement? What is the Prophet ﷺ basically telling him? He said, if you're in a situation where you have no choice and you have to maintain certain ties in certain relationships, what is he saying to do? Forbear. Like, seek spiritual recourse. Know that every time that these people are trying to take advantage of you, that there are angels that are throwing hot coals in their face. And that their angels are there to support you. And that you are not alone. Right? You actually have support. You have the spiritual support. But this is a situation where you have no choice. But when you do have a choice, like for example, Ibrahim alayhi salam, at what point did he leave his father? When they threw him in the fire, right? Like they're trying to kill, they're literally trying to kill him, And he was like, okay, maybe it's time for me to go. Maybe it's time for me to go.
He tried everything, right?
Like he tried everything at that point. He actually tried everything, right? So the thing is, like, it's important to keep in mind some of these things, man. It's, it is okay to break certain relationships depending on how toxic those relationships are. I mean, if that wasn't the case, well, why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow divorce? You know what I mean? Or some people will be like, okay, well, what about the hadith? لا تهاجر أخاك فوق ثلاث. Don't abandon your brother for more than 3 days. What does that mean? Like, abandonment is something that's active. If I haven't spoken to my friend in a week, does that mean I've abandoned him? No, right? Abandonment is active. Like, I'm trying not to talk to this person. If I just happen not to talk to him, or happen not to see him or her, or whatever the case might be, I'm not intentionally doing that, right? There's a big difference. Like, is it okay for some people just to see their families like 2-3 times a year? Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Why? Because I'm not actively trying to what? To avoid them. I mean, the thing is, everybody has their own dynamic, right? Everybody has their own family situation, and it's important to keep those things in mind. Your family shouldn't feel abandoned, but at the same time, can I use their feelings to guide my decisions? No. Like I have to many times set my own boundaries, and it's just unfortunate, but that's the way it is. There's like so many narrations about just showing forbearance, for showing helm, for showing sabr, for showing patience, and all these things are really, really important. Like, they're just verses and explanations of those verses that talk about a lot of these things. So here, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Let those who are sedate and prudent be near me than those who are next to him." He said it 3 times, and beware of the tumult of the markets. So he sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not only is he encouraging others to be patient, not only is he encouraging others to show this forbearance, but he is also encouraging us to surround ourselves with people who have those characteristics. Right? If I surround myself with angry people, the chances of me being angry is going to increase. Right? But if I surround myself with people, who show patience, who show helm, who show this, like, in dealing with a lot of these issues, they show a lot of wisdom. Those are the people who I really want to surround myself with and I want to spend time with. May Allah subhanahu. And he said, beware of the tumult of the markets. Don't get caught up in it. Don't get caught up in, don't spend all your time in the markets. Don't spend all your time in the mall. He's not saying don't go to the mall, but he's saying what? Don't spend too much time. Don't spend too much time there. Why?
Because it's a distraction.
Right, there's a lot of distractions. Right, there's a lot of worldly distractions at the mall, and we don't want our hearts to become attached to these things. It doesn't mean that we don't like things, but by going and spending time there, like extra time there, there's a higher chance of our hearts being more attached to those things. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq. This hadith is actually really interesting. So basically, there's this individual who has this gentleness and deliberation, meaning that he's not rushed to make judgments. Right? He takes time. He sits down, like he thinks about things. He's very focused. So he said to the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Is this something that's natural that I have, or is it something that I've learned?" The Prophet ﷺ said, "No, this is a natural trait that you have." So even in that, he was thankful, and he said, "I thank Allah for putting these traits in me." And me having them and being able to actually act on them.
So what did the Sahabas do? They kiss his feet?
Huh? I wouldn't be surprised. Oh, so basically what happened here is that there was a wafd that came. There was a what's the word? Shul wafd. It's like a group of people that came, like emissaries.
Delegation.
Like a delegation. Oh, thank you. So there's a delegation that came to the Prophet ﷺ, and what happened was, like, everybody was rushing to get to the Prophet ﷺ, because they wanted to kiss his hands and feet. But he took his time. So he said, "Well, you know what?" He said, the Prophet ﷺ then pointed him out. He said, "I like him." And he was like, "What?" He's like, "Because you have this gentleness and you have this deliberation." But he didn't actually scold them for wanting to do this. But he never scolded anyone for wanting to kiss his hands or his face, or wanting to be near him or spend time with him. But he was a beloved personality, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. People just wanted to be around him. People wanted to be near him. People wanted to talk to him. People wanted to hear him speak. That's just who he was, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is another one about having taqwa and not showing that you want this world. And even he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, this is from the ways of gaining the pleasure of people by not what? By showing that you don't need them, right? And showing that you're not reliant upon them, showing that you want nothing from them. Even he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, every time he needed money, what did he do? He would take a loan from the Jews. Like, subhanAllah. He had people like Abdurrahman ibn Auf. He had people like Uthman. He had people like Abu Bakr, Umar, who at the drop of a hat would be willing to give everything that they had, and he never took money for himself. Why? Huh? Well, the power dynamics is definitely part of it, for sure. What is the other part of it? He wanted to show them what? He had no worldly need from them. He literally wanted nothing. He wanted nothing from them except their spiritual enlightenment and their spiritual guidance. He didn't want them to think even for a moment that he had any type of worldly need from him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is one of the reasons that they loved him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so much. Omar said, seek knowledge and learn from knowledge, tranquility and forbearance. Ali radiallahu anhu, he said, it is not good just to amass wealth and children, but true good is to amass knowledge, expand your forbearance, and boast about worshipping your Lord. If you accomplish this well, praise Allah. And if you do it poorly, seek His forgiveness. Al-Hasan said, seek knowledge and beautify it with dignity and forbearance. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from those who have dignity and those who have hilm and sabr. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqin, Nabiyina Muhammad wa ala sahbihi wa sallam. Any questions? No? خلاص. I will see you guys inshallah next week. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك واشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك.
Will they have a new class on Monday after the class?
Next week, not this coming week, but the week after. So inshallah, not next Monday, but the following Monday, we'll be starting an explanation of Sahih Muslim. So if you guys have a copy of Sahih Muslim, please bring it. I'm going to be using a lot of Arabic, so just be ready for that. If you can't follow or you don't understand, please feel free to stop me, inshallah. But I can't, It's going to be on Monday. It's going to be Mondays after Uthman's class. Yeah. But
Mondays or Wednesday?
Wednesday mazal. This is going to continue. We're just adding some more classes.
Okay, and so it's going to be not this week, not next week, the week after.
I'll do about
2 days.
inshallah.